Hi, everybody, and welcome to another MASH Sessions. I'm speaking to Ali Wolf, the General Manager of London venue, the Clapham Grand. How are you doing today, Ali?
Not too bad, not too bad. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. I'm very good. So I recently attended the Frank Turner gig, which you had a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the sort of first reopening gigs, wasn't it, for that we've had sort of in London. I guess just to start with, what was your take on the gig? Is there anything you'd kind of take away from it? How did it go?
I thought it was great. It was, operationally they're quite hard work, very labour intensive, staff heavy. So the actual mechanics of putting the show on is a lot harder than it was previously. But in terms of positivity and the energy that you got, I thought it was brilliant because when in the world has anyone ever been in a situation where they've gone 6 months without being able to go to a gig? So to be able to suddenly rectify that and give people that experience again, I think is an incredibly positive feeling to have. But then the energy that the crowd have and the kind of that atmosphere, I think, is really special.
I definitely felt that. I think that even though, regulations requiring it was a sit-down gig and, it was seating only in a kind of seating plan, there was such an atmosphere of everyone just so happy to kind of come back to any live show, really. I remember at one point you kind of stealthily got onto the stage and slid a note to Frank as he was performing to say people are singing along a bit too much, because that was one of the regulations, was to try and cut down on that. Obviously, that's not, in an ideal world, you don't want to do that, and neither does Frank Turner. But how do you think that the kind of things like that will impact us going forwards, the sort of live experience?
I mean, those are the rules. Yeah. There's a global pandemic going on. Transmission comes from people singing. If you want to go to concerts, and if I want to be able to put on concerts and people want to be able to come to them, to gigs and events, I think we have to make compromises. It's that simple. I don't think there can be any negativity towards it. You can't begrudge anyone anything. It's that's what we've been told, and there's a lot of negativity towards it, thinking, we shouldn't be told what to do. Why are we so complicit in government rules? And it's because that's what we're being told we need to do to prevent people dying a death of an illness that there currently is no vaccine or cure for. And whether it's one death or 1,000 deaths, a death is a death. So I think of course it's frustrating. You want to be able to sing at a concert. You want to be able to be in a mosh pit. You want to be able to hug everyone you're with and strangers and have that communal experience that we all, as human beings, it's in our nature to have. But the reality is that's how the infection spreads. So if we want to do these things that help us not only get businesses back up and running and keep people in work, but also are good for people's mental health, to be able to come and socialise and be entertained, then it's really black and white. That's what you do. It might compromise the experience a little bit, but I'm more than happy to play that, to do that, if it enables everything else to happen.
And it was kind of a double momentous occasion for you, wasn't it? Because it was the first gig where you had your balcony back in operation for, was it about 17 years? Did you say more than that? You said 93, didn't you?
No, it was 2005 actually.
Oh, okay.
Well, Oasis played in 2005, which was the last time it was open, but it actually hadn't been open before that for probably another 10 years.
Okay.
And when I realised that for us to be able to trade with the distancing restrictions in place to enable us to increase our capacity as a seated space was integral, it was the obvious decision to make. Obviously, refurbishing part of the venue when you've got no money is not, it's the wrong time to be doing it, but it was 100% the right decision. So when Frank played, that was the first time we'd had a live act on stage since the Gallaghers in 2005.
And even since then, I think quite a lot's changed, hasn't it? So that was it 2 weeks ago? About two and a half weeks ago?
Maybe 3 weeks ago on Friday.
3 weeks. So even this past week and today as well, we've had protests around sort of Parliament and in Birmingham today as well. I was at the silent protest that happened last week, where everybody sort of turned their backs on Parliament, and to symbolise our industry having its back turned on by the government. What's your take on some of the protests that have happened recently? What kind of further support do you think is needed?
I don't have the answer. That's the problem. I think I don't. It's terrible. It's heartbreaking. Of course it is. Some of my best friends are being made redundant from jobs that you think are going to be far more secure than my own, in bigger companies, in bigger venues. People have made decades of their career and have created a cultural asset and financial asset and value, and it's heartbreaking. But I don't know what the answer is myself. I think it's criminal that the landlords are still being able to charge rent, and the majority of this Arts Council funding, when it appears, if it goes to independent venues like ourselves, is just basically going to be spent being given to a landlord. And that I think is my biggest issue. The furlough, the job retention scheme, all of those things, I don't have an answer for that. How do you even facilitate bankrolling to that extent? I don't know. But not implementing measures that give landlords the reason to not charge rent by taking the pressure off of them with interest rates on the banks that they've got their loans out against their freeholds. I mean, I'm not an accountant and I'm not a businessman, but that to me feels like everything goes from the top down. And if you don't make it easy for the people at the top, they ain't going to make it easy for the people below them. So if my landlord's not being motivated to pass on a rent reduction or a rent freeze because someone above them is forcing their hand, the banks aren't being bailed out to bail out the landlords. So they're just passing money up the chain rather than down the chain. It's bonkers.
What's your take on the curfew? So the 10 p.m. curfew, but I believe wouldn't actually affect live music. So if you'd started your gig before 10 p.m., then you should be able to finish it and not be affected by the curfew, as far as my understanding. So in theory, you in the Clapham Grand, you could start a gig at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., 9:59 p.m. if you really wanted to, and sort of go on until whenever it finishes. Do you think you'll be affected by that? Or do you think that it will be effective generally? Or do you think it's a bit of a misguided? Because I've seen quite a few people say they think if anything, it's going to have negative impacts where people will just be outside in supermarkets and etc. What's your take on that?
I'm just going to throw parties in supermarkets now. I'll file. No, I think
maybe that could be the new normal.
It's completely and utterly absurd, and it's a decision that has been made obviously without any consultation on the hospitality sector, because as anyone with half a brain knows who runs a venue, if you exit your venue quickly at a time when people aren't willing to exit the venue slowly and gradually, and you do that at the same time as every other venue in your catchment area, the footprint on all of the resources that people then use at that point in time, whether it's travel, shops, takeaways, etc., is huge. So you've just taken people out of an environment where we have spent fortune trying to make safe. You're taking them out of that environment and putting them somewhere where they don't have that level of care. Like there's a pastoral, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but there's like we have a duty of care over our customers when you run a venue or a club or any venue. And the majority of us take that incredibly seriously and do everything we can possibly do to make sure people are safe, irrespective of a pandemic, whether it's because of alcohol intoxication levels, drugs, the one bad egg that comes in the venue that can cause problems for everyone else. We have that ability and the care and that sense of care and due diligence. And we're being denied the opportunity to carry that out and putting people into environments where there's no one to do that. So from that part of it, the decision is bonkers, and actually, just begs belief as to why they think that's the right decision to make. From the point of view of the majority of venues, if you're a bar or a pub, it's going to cause you problems. If you're a club, obviously, even though you couldn't do vertical drinking in clubs anymore, people were trying to lay blueprints for seated late night events. You're screwed. For me, yes, I'm a show venue. I can open up at 7 or 8 and a band or an act can go on stage at 9 and they can run past 10 o'clock till 10:30, 10:45, but my bars have to stop trading at 10. In fact, before 10. So you're automatically losing the revenue. The only revenue you've really got after that point in time, you can't have it. You're also, I think, installing a certain amount of fear in customers again. It's like telling them they can't be out after 10. It's just another layer of confusion, a layer of anxiety, a barrier towards ticket purchasing, a communicational complex thing. It's like, it just creates a whole world of organizational frustrations. And also for me, I've got a license till 3 a.m. So I could run, I can do multiple events on a Friday and a Saturday night that I consider to be safe, that are seated and distanced, but I can't because I've got to close. My bars close at 10.
And like you said about everybody sort of pouring out at 10 p.m. I mean, if you leave any live show, you leave a festival, you have this kind of managed experience where there'll be a big crowd, so that people who organize the event have put so much thought into how that crowd is managed, and that is kind of being lost, isn't it? Because you're just throwing it to the wind and saying, well, everyone get out at 10 p.m. I'm sure people are putting thought into it, but I know what you mean, especially because Clapham Grand, you're on Clapham High Street, right by Clapham Junction Station in London. It's incredibly busy anyway. So if everybody comes out at 10 p.m, all that hard work to organize everybody inside is just thrown out the window, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Like I say, I don't think they made it. I don't think they've discussed with anyone who works in our industry as to whether or not, even if it was required to stop the spread of COVID, as to whether or not it was the practical decision to be made as a best practice to achieve it, if you see what I mean.
And just as a kind of closing one, so we have, despite all the protests and some of the policies which have not rubbed everybody the wrong way, there has been some positive news. Like the O2 Arena announced this week that they're coming back with socially distant shows for just under 5,000 people,
Wow.
Which is, I think it's 4,700. So obviously not ideal because their capacity is about 20,000, but obviously a step in the right direction. So how do you kind of envision the future of the Clapham Grand? I mean, without, I guess, getting too deeply into the money side of things, but how sustainable is it to keep going with socially distanced gigs for you guys? And do you think for the industry at large?
I think it's purely dependent upon the individual business. I'm afraid the overhead, fixed overheads, the rent, how you can adjust your labour and all the costs attached to it. I think it's harder for really small venues because the actual amount of people you can put in a venue with distancing becomes so small that not only is the margin negligible, that the customer experience doesn't exist, because ultimately, there is no customer experience if there's hardly any customers. There's a required amount of people in a room for it to feel like you're at something that's actually a thing. And I think for really, really big independent venues, it's going to be incredibly hard because their margins are obviously set against their capacity. Someone on the O2, I mean, I don't know, there's money there. There's obviously huge costs, but there's big fish involved in running sites like that. And if they've been able to create a business model that works on a fraction of their capacity, 5,000 people is still a lot of human beings who are buying drinks, buying food, and buying ticket prices. And there's a lot of acts out there who will want to be touring to sell those tickets. So I think the really small venues will really struggle, and I think the largest independent sites will really struggle, and obviously nightclubs are just completely in trouble. We won't be able to do it if we can't find further financial support. Our rent is astronomical in relation to our full standing capacity, let alone reduced seating capacity. So we've made a decision to chip away at that by being open and trading, but it's not sustainable unless we can find other ways to support the business through support, basically.
Absolutely. It's definitely difficult times for everybody. Hopefully there is a debate in Parliament about the impact on live music venues and businesses which I believe is happening as we speak at 3 p.m. on what day is it today? Tuesday. So fingers crossed we might get some more positive news coming out soon. But in the meantime, thank you, Ali. Thank you for your time.
No worries. I just, before we finish, I think like it's very easy to get caught up in the negativity of everything because it's omnipresent. But I think there's a lot of positivity to come out of situations. You know, like you got to look to the positives, and what's really positive in the last 6 months is how much the industry's pulled together and championed itself and worked together to facilitate pressure on the government and also work together to make customers safe again. And I think there's a massive here. It's massively important to not forget about customers in all of this. We talk about the businesses, we talk about the venues, we talk about the jobs, we talk about the industry, but there's millions and millions of people whose lives were built around socializing and going out to be entertained. And for them to have that taken away from them, I think for people's mental health and quality of living, it's really important for us to find a way to bring that back, even if in the short term it's far more hard work than it's ever been and it's financially risky. But ultimately, I think you're better off doing than not doing. Life will find a way. It's not going to be easy, but we're better off doing it than not. And I think it's like people's lives are shit. Like entertainment here is escapism. That's what entertainment is. It's to pull you out of the shitness of life. And people's lives couldn't really be any more crap right now. So it's really important that people can come out and be entertained in any format that you can do. And that's the thing that drives us forward here, is the fact that ultimately that's what we should be doing, and provided it's safe, which is really important that people don't forget about the pandemic, because it's easy to get frustrated by the rules and the guidelines to the point whereby you try and cut corners because you don't take it seriously. When the reality is there's a global pandemic, people are dying and people are ill, and you have to stick with it and not let it beat you, and try and do what you need to do. And then the money thing is just the extra layer on top that just, but you know what I'm saying? It's like you've got to just push on, really.
Definitely. Balance has to be found.
Yeah.
But I think, it's definitely great that venues like Clapham Grand have been able to stage the beginnings of a comeback for live music. Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time, Ali. Excellent input.
Take it easy. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye.